Hi, I'm Eric McGhee, and I'm a policy fellow at the Public Policy Institute of California, studying politics and elections. California used two new reforms on the fall ballot for the first time: a redistricting plan drawn by an independent redistricting commission instead of by the legislature, and a top two primary that let voters choose any candidate, regardless of party, with the two candidates receiving the most votes, again regardless of party, advancing to the fall. That raised the possibility of contest between two candidates of the same party on the fall ballot, which we've never had before in the Golden State. What kind of impact have these reforms had? Most supporters hoped that they would elect more moderates to office, moderates willing to cross party lines to find common solutions to the state's problems. But it's too early to conclude much on that score. What candidates say on the campaign trail is important, to be sure, but how they govern is what really matters. We'll know more on that in a year or so. However, we can say something about other expectations. Many hoped the reforms would make races more competitive, and it looks like they have, for a couple different reasons. The first reason is redistricting. The new lines placed many incumbents outside their comfort zone. 10 incumbents lost, 7 of them in districts that had been heavily redrawn. Many incumbents chose not to run for re-election at all. And there were more races decided by a smaller margin than at any point in the last 10 years. The result? More new state legislators and members of Congress from California than in recent memory. The second reason we have more competition stems from the top two primary. It produced some fall contests between candidates of the same party. Roughly 1/3 of these races were decided by less than 10 points, and all but one occurred in a district that never would have hosted such a competitive race otherwise. These same party races accounted for 6 out of the 10 incumbent losses, including 2 where the incumbent was beaten by another incumbent, and 4 where the incumbent was beaten by a challenger. In spite of these changes, however, the bigger picture largely reinforced the status quo. Most incumbents won re-election, and by margins about as large as in the past. In same-party races where the parties weighed in to support one candidate, the candidate endorsed by the party won most of the time. And one of the biggest developments of the night, the Democratic Party's success at winning 2/3 of both legislative chambers, was at least as much a product of good Democratic Party turnout as it was of redistricting or any other reform. Was all this new competition and turnover a fluke, or should we expect more of the same moving forward? Some of the change was likely a product of the uncertainty that came from such a radical redistricting. But ironically, future competition may depend on a third reform that passed last June, a revision to California's term limits law. Under the state's previous term limits, there was no reason to contest a sitting assembly member or state senator, since he or she would soon be forced to retire anyway. But now, every new legislator can potentially serve longer, 6 years longer for the assembly and 4 years for the Senate. This might encourage potential challengers to throw their hat into the ring rather than wait as much as a decade for their next chance. In fact, this logic already applies to congressional races, where there have never been term limits, but where competitive seats will most likely nurture the hopes of enterprising politicians in particular parts of the state. And in uncompetitive seats, the top two primary gives candidates a second chance to knock off the incumbent in the general election, even if they don't win the first time around. So in sum, the reforms have produced more competition, but we'll have to see whether they make for more moderation in California's representatives. California rarely stops tinkering with its representation, so we'll likely have a chance to revisit all of these topics and more in the months and years to come. Thanks for watching.